welcome back to the Simple Idea Podcast. My name is Makai Green, and today I have a special guest with me today, Ali Abdaal. He has a YouTube channel with over 200,000 subscribers, and he's actually a doctor here in the UK. Ali, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. It's very nice to see you. Thank you for making the journey down to Cambridge.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Like I said, I was surprised you even responded at all, to be honest, but I'm glad that I'm here. I didn't expect to make this trip to Cambridge. I'm actually studying here in London at the moment, and sent him an email, and here we are, just recording this episode. So it's kind of cool to be here right now.
Here we are.
But I really do just want to hop right into things. I have a ton of questions to ask you. Just give me a little bit of your background story so that people know a little bit more about you and how you even got into content creation, why you're a doctor, just like a little bit of background about you, I guess you could say.
Okay, sure. So at the moment I am 25 and I'm in my first year of being a doctor, and I work in Cambridge, which is in the UK, and I was a student at Cambridge for the last 6 years, in medical school. And I started the YouTube channel about 2 years ago now. I'd been going through med school fairly normally. I did kind of do a thing on the side where I started my own business, and that did reasonably well. And I've always been into coding and design, and sort of vaguely into the tech scene. So I was fairly familiar with a lot of advice about startups and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it was only in about 2017 when I was on my medical elective, which is where we go to a random country for a few months and do medical stuff. So I was in Cambodia and Vietnam, and I thought, it would be kind of cool to vlog some of that experience. Yeah. And around that time, I discovered people like Casey Neistat and realized that vlogging was a thing. And then kind of since starting off with vlogs, I've now kind of branched out into more educational content about how to be an effective learner, and kind of just sharing my passion for things like iPads and my favorite iPhone apps and kind of tech reviews along that front. So yeah, it's gone reasonably well, and I keep it up while I'm a doctor. So it's something fun to do on the weekends and in the evenings. That's
absolutely insane. I just want to say that now. Like, that resume is something else. Like, you talk about it casually, but most people don't. Most people haven't achieved stuff like that. But that's awesome. And yeah, your YouTube channel, one of my favorites, very, very authentic in its approach. And I'm personally a fan of the textile reviews. So. You're usually a channel that I gravitate towards when I am on YouTube.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Yeah. But that's awesome. I do want to kind of gravitate towards you being a doctor, though, and you managing that with content creation. Like I said, I imagine that, you're relatively busy as a doctor. Like, how is your schedule, and like, where do you find the time to produce that content on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so the schedule of a doctor is not too bad, actually. I think a lot of people have this idea that being a doctor is super, super, super hard work. Perhaps it is in some places, but here in the UK, and specifically in Cambridge where I work, it's a big hospital, it's well supported. I only really work, I think maximum is about 48 hours a week on average.
That's
so
not too bad.
That's not too bad, especially considering friends who work in London, might be banking jobs and stuff, working 80 hours a week. I can't imagine doing YouTube on the side if I was working 80 hours a week.
Just 80 hours a week?
Yeah, some people do have that, management consultancy or investment banking, these kind of high-flying city jobs, which I suppose is where a lot of my friends who were not medical students in Cambridge went to. Okay. But yeah, 48 hours a week on average. Some weeks that means I'm working kind of 60 hours, but then that's made up for the following week where we have a few days off. So I suppose my main tactic for churning out content, as it were, is that I kind of batch film on my days off. And then on days when I'm working in the evenings, I'll kind of plan out videos. So I've got this kind of pipeline of ideas where I'm spending like a whole week kind of planning out 5 different videos, and then I'll batch film them in one day.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I know batching usually is something that a lot of creators that I follow, and probably that you follow as well, it's a pretty common thing to do.
Yeah, thanks to Tim Ferriss for the for the tip.
Tim Ferriss with the tips, definitely. I believe Matt D'Avola is the same, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I guess like once you have that underneath your belt, you kind of gravitate towards it. So kind of a rapid fire session here. I just want to keep going.
By all means, go for it.
All right. So this is kind of like directing back to like what I am kind of interested in, but I just want to see like your stance on it. How heavy are you into personal development or self-help? And are there any particular figures that you follow?
Oh, so
who do you follow? Who do you not follow? What are your reasons? Like, who have you like drawn the most like influence from in terms of like building yourself up as a person?
So I've been into self-help since I was about 14 years old, and been preaching it to all of my friends, right, left, and center, to the point where it almost became a meme that I was so into kind of self-help and self-improvement books that I would, you know, like, yeah, I think at university I would often, you know, if a discussion was happening, even with anything even vaguely related to self-help or self-improvement, I would quote from some kind of book. And
that's amazing.
People would be like, "Oh, here we go again," or some kind of podcast. Be like, yeah. So yeah, big into self-help. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I suppose major people I've looked up to, obviously someone like Tim Ferriss in the sort of more entrepreneurship space, but also in the personal productivity, efficiency kind of market.
Okay.
I also really like this guy called Charlie Houpert. He runs a YouTube channel now called Charisma on Command.
I feel like I've heard of that before.
Yeah, so he does like charisma breakdowns, like how Will Smith is charismatic, and that gives like 3 million views.
Oh, that's
but
awesome.
Sort of back in the day when I discovered him, I was kind of kind of one of his indie fans. I think that was about like 7 years ago, where he had this book called Charisma on Command, and that was kind of in book format, teaching social skills and how to be a more likable person and stuff like that.
Definitely
So I've always kind of been into that stuff. And I suppose back in the day when I was in high school, me and a few of my friends, we got quite interested in the whole pickup artist thing. And that led to reading books like The Game and Models by Mark Manson. And that was kind of a springboard into the realm of personal development. Because I don't know how familiar you are with pickup artist advice. But back in the day in 2002, with the release of The Game and things like the Mystery Method, it was very much focused on specific tactics and just kind of tricks that you can use. But then the whole industry morphed into more of a personal development vibe. So instead of it being about here are tricks that you can use to attract girls, it ended up being more like, you know, here are some things you can use to improve yourself, and, you know, girls will start to like you naturally as a result of that. So that was my first springboard into personal development, but then I used that to discover a lot of other resources.
All right, that's awesome. I'm actually kind of amazed that you said 14. I wasn't really expecting that, but you know, most kids at 14, they're worried about, you know, like going to their soccer game or hanging out with their friends and riding their bikes. But at 14, you're worried about, you know, personal development content and books and like slowly improving yourself as an individual, which I've never heard of because I just recently got into it as of like maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, but that's like, you know, 16, 17 for you. So
yeah,
that's pretty early as well.
Yeah, but 14, I don't know, it's kind of surprising to hear that, but that's awesome. So kind of slowly drifting off course of that a little bit. How do you? I want to frame this the correct way. When you're out of your comfort zone or under extreme stress, how do you typically deal with that? Knowing after all of your experiences, like where are you at with like dealing with stress or just being in uncomfortable situations? How do you typically cope with that or deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And it's not a set it's not a set circumstance. Just in general, what do you typically do?
So in general, I don't really get stressed. Like I can count on one hand the amount of times in my life where I felt stressed in inverted commas, and I think a big part of that is just kind of you know, obviously some element is a natural, you know, personality thing, but I'm much more a fan of sort of nurture rather than nature. So I think in terms of specific mindsets and tactics, the stuff around stoicism has really helped. So when I read William Irvine's Ancient Guide to Stoic Joy, or whatever it's called, and then Derren Brown's Happy, a lot of that reinforced what I'd already been thinking. Things like, you know, our reaction, our thoughts and feelings come from the story we tell ourselves about events, not from those events themselves. So if something is scary, it's not that the situation itself is scary for the most part. It's that the story I'm telling to myself about that event is scary. Or if I'm feeling sad or anxious, then it's not the event itself that's making it happen for the most part. It's the story I'm telling myself. And so just recognizing that means that if I'm ever in a situation where I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed, I kind of take a step back and try and appreciate the context and realize that actually in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't really matter. And if it does matter, I can always ask for help. Yeah,
which is understandable. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's kind of like your brain comes up with its own narrative as to what it thinks is happening, but that might not be the reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, people might argue that you're kind of fooling yourself, but I think that's fine. I mean, if you're fooling yourself into kind of feeling happier and feeling less stressed, I think that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't think anybody wants to, you know, be stressed, especially if they can avoid it. So like I said, this is rapid fire, so I just want to keep on going. I have a ton of questions to ask you. And this is with, I guess, the internet and social media. The digital age has made media, much more accessible, accessible, and, it's accessible for everybody to use. How do you deal with like the constant bombardment of information? Just dealing with the internet, dealing with social media. Do you use social media that much? Are you on the internet? Do you like limit your time on it? What's your relationship with it? Is it a healthy one, or something that's a work in progress?
Yeah, so I think my relationship with social media is quite healthy. I think it's slightly different for me now than it would have been, say, 4 years ago, because now I have this kind of side business almost, where I've got the YouTube channel, I've got my Instagram, I've got my blog and email newsletter, and all these things that benefit from social media. And so in a way, I almost have to embrace social media. I wouldn't be like, hey, I'm going to take a hiatus from Instagram, or I'm going to delete my Facebook account, because I think that for someone like me now, that would be counterproductive. I also think that kind of what we were discussing on the walk here, that for me, I want to have this good balance between consuming and creating. And so everything that I consume, I've now developed a sort of system, or I'm developing a system that it goes into this idea of like a quote second brain, end quote, which is kind of where I use Evernote and Notion and apps like that to track the interesting things that I come across on various social medias. So I very rarely spend time on Instagram just kind of scrolling through my feed. And when I do, I kind of catch myself and think, no, this is bad. Instead, I would be, for example, browsing Twitter through my newsfeed that I've tried to curate for people who post interesting things, adding those articles to my Pocket or Instapaper and then kind of reading those, or just kind of reading a book on Kindle. So I don't really do a lot of mindless scrolling. I try and consume social media with the intent that I want to be creating stuff out of it.
Yeah, because at this point, you need that to leverage what you're doing, I would say, too. So, yeah, that makes sense, actually. Because you don't have the luxury of just being able to be like, hey, I'm going to drop off the face of the planet for a while, because it's counterproductive to what you're doing.
Exactly, yeah. I have no need to. If I suppose it got to the point where I was super addicted to Instagram, then sure, I might be like, people can live without me posting for a month or two. But I think at this moment, I've got a good balance between consuming and creating.
Yeah, no doubt at all. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, actually, that was a very well thought out answer. And very well thought answer. And thank you for that. So like I said, still rapid fire. At this point you answered my question with this, but what single book, I want to ask you, has been the most influential throughout your life? Any recommendation, it doesn't matter what it is.
The 4-Hour Workweek, easy.
Right there?
Yeah.
4 hour? Okay, 4 hour workweek. Excellent. For those of us who don't know what the 4-Hour Workweek is, do you want to give a brief explanation?
Sure. So it's a book written by Tim Ferriss. It was written in like 2007, I want to say, and it's the thing that made him really famous. And it's pretty much required reading for for anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur or to kind of have their own business or whatever. Yep. And the main kind of takeaways from it are that it tries to advise against the standard, what it calls the deferred life plan, which is the standard narrative that we're implicitly fed, which is that we want to get to a good school, get to a good university, get a good job, work our way up that job, such that when we retire, we'll then be able to have fun. And it says that, hang on, why do you want to wait until you're 65 and you've got osteoarthritis in both your knees in order to have fun? Also, by the time you get there and, we'll have this dream that, hey, I want to be rich and I want to live on an island and sip mojitos and read my books. If you try that for a few weeks, you realize you get really, really bored very quickly. And so it doesn't make any sense to work towards this thing that we've never even experienced in the hope that it will give us happiness. And so what Tim Ferriss advises in the book and what he did when writing the book is that he would take these, quote, mini retirements. So, for example, where he would go to, let's say, Thailand for 3 months at a time and kind of live the life of a retired person there. And what enables this sort of lifestyle is having multiple streams of income. So where you have an online business that generates money without you needing to actively put time into it. And that's kind of where the title of the quote, the 4-Hour Workweek comes from. That kind of working towards a world in which theoretically all you need to do is put in 4 hours a week of work, in inverted commas again, into your business, and it kind of runs itself. And that is an amazing thing that's been made possible by the internet and by the fact that we now no longer need to trade our time for money. Instead, we can build products and sell them online. And that means that it's not a case of, an hour of my time is worth £100. It's a case that, overall in aggregate, all the various things that I've applied to my business are generating income while I sleep. So that's kind of the starting premise of it, but there's also a lot more about personal productivity, about things like automation and delegation, and how you can go about trying to craft this lifestyle. And Tim Ferriss kind of came up with the phrase lifestyle design, which is now peddled by everyone everywhere, about how can we intentionally design our lifestyle to fit in with this goal of long-term happiness. So that was kind of a rambly thingy. If that sounds even vaguely interesting, you should definitely read the book. But yeah, that was the single book that's most changed my life.
Not gonna lie to you, I'm impressed, but I'm not surprised. That was like a perfect explanation of that book. It's actually, when I first started kind of dabbling with entrepreneurship, and I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur at all, because I don't have the track record to call myself that, but it is something that I keep leaning towards. I've experimented with different business ideas, Amazon FBA, Kindle publishing, and I have made money from some of these things, but not enough for me to be like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. But that is a book that I read right off the bat. Maybe the second book ever that I read next to Psycho-Cybernetics, which is just a book that's about, framing your mind to think the way that you should be thinking.
Oh, that's a good book as well.
Yeah, very good book.
I first read that, I think, in my sort of penultimate year of high school.
Okay.
And I highlighted the hell out of it on Kindle. But yeah, really, really good book.
Yeah, I have the physical copy of it, and the entire book is just yellow.
Nice.
Entire book. Absolutely love it. I'm rereading it, or was rereading it before I got here to London. But I have a bad habit of reading multiple books at the same time.
Oh, that's fine. I'm reading like 5-6 books at the moment.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I have like 3 books in my bag right now. One I just picked up yesterday from this museum in South Bank, I believe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, photography book.
Like, why physical books? For photography books, I can understand, but surely you've got a Kindle.
I personally do not like reading digitally. I just like being able to like flip over a book and just flip over a page and like feel it and then highlight and just being able to reference it.
Have you ever tried reading on a Kindle?
I have. I don't know what it is. I just don't feel as connected to the book as I should be. It's very weird.
But okay, I'm gonna try and convince you why you're wrong about this.
Oh no, so, I'm all ears. Plus, I like personally having a library as well.
Why?
So, I don't know, just being able to like pull a book off the shelf. Like sometimes I like to be able to disconnect from just electronic devices.
Why?
Well, for me personally, I covered this in earlier podcast episodes, but I quit social media for about around 6 to 7-ish months back in October, and I didn't get back on until March. Cool. Yeah, until March of this year.
Okay.
So I was on a hiatus. I just kind of like looked inward, just to try to like find myself a little more, just disconnect from the world. It's kind of hard to explain, but it helped me like grow a little bit more as a person. And I have like a deeper appreciation for the things around me now. Like before, I'd notice I'd be walking down the road and I'm staring at my phone, and I get from point A to point B, and I have no idea like what happened in between. I'm like, I don't like that. Like I don't like the fact that I'm walking and like I'm not appreciative of this walk right now. You know what I mean? So like I noticed it was just my involvement with just like electronics and just like digital stuff and media. Like I don't know, it just didn't feel right. So I just started to get like more in tune with myself and with my surroundings again.
Okay, have you got lights in your house?
I do have lights in my house.
Okay, but and the fact that you have lights is not something that makes you think, oh damn, it's an electronic device. I want to disconnect from all electronic devices. Yeah. So it's not the fact that it's an electronic device that you're concerned about. It's the fact that presumably it's pulling your attention away from, quote, the finer things in life.
Yeah,
appreciating the color of the sky and the singing of the birds and all that stuff that people say when they go on social media hiatuses.
Yeah.
So my point for something, I can totally see your point when it comes to something like a phone that's trying to pull your attention away. But for something like a Kindle, which is essentially an offline device, it's essentially a piece of paper that it just happens to have books on it.
That's true.
I don't understand why you would lump that in the same category as your phone or your computer or your iPad that's sending you push notifications 24/7.
I think for that, and I'm going to contest to that.
Yeah.
The only time I've ever used a Kindle was like the actual app. I never went out of my way to buy like a physical Kindle.
Oh, you haven't got a Kindle?
I don't have a physical Kindle.
Okay.
When I use Kindle, it was on my phone.
I've got a spare Kindle. I will give you a spare Kindle, my spare Kindle as a present in return for coming over here.
All right.
I guarantee it will change your life. They've done studies on this. People who use e-readers read about 50% more books per year than people who don't use e-readers. The amazing thing about the Kindle is that while you're reading stuff, it's, there's no distractions, there's no notifications, it's literally all you're reading. It looks like a piece of paper, so it looks like reading a physical book.
Sure.
You can also highlight anything you want on your Kindle. And the great thing about that is that you can then sync your highlights to something like Evernote or you can use the Kindle app to read through your highlights. So for example, what I do fairly regularly when I'm thinking of new ideas for content is I would just browse through my Kindle highlights, and I can just see them all on a single page in the Kindle app. I've recently started exporting them to Evernote. And in addition, there is a fantastic app called Readwise, which it syncs with your Amazon Kindle account, and every day it emails you 5 of your top highlights from random books. So I've got about 2,000 highlights across the books that I've read over the last 10 years. I've got a Kindle library of hundreds of books. And every day I see 5 highlights. So today I saw something from 4 Hour Workweek, I saw something from Tools of Titans, I saw something from Happy by Darren Brown, I saw something from The Magic of Thinking Big. And I suspect that with all your physical books and all your highlighting and stuff, you don't have a practice to review those on a daily basis. I would be very surprised if you did.
I do not.
So,
which is something I struggle with now.
And I agree. It's nice having a physical book, but I think all of the benefits, especially for someone like you who's interested in content creation, you pretty much have to use a Kindle because it just completely 10x's the amount you can gain from all these resources. So I will give you my Kindle, my spare one. I bought some from Amazon to make a review about it, and then I forgot to return them. So I have these 2 lying around, so you can have one of them. Start using a Kindle; it will change your life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, like I know like there's physical Kindles, but I just haven't actually used a physical one. I use the app, so like I'm like, I don't want to do that. Just physical books.
In fact,
but yeah, that's
get it out and do it right now.
Amazing. Actually, I didn't even know you could do that. Export to Evernote or anything like that.
That's all yours.
Thank you. I didn't expect to. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Happy birthday.
Maybe I won't actually have a physical library. I bought a bookshelf and everything, so I'm a little upset about that. But, maybe once in a while, if I like a book on Kindle enough, I'll buy the actual
one. I mean, that makes sense. I've got a few physical books. I usually buy them to give them away.
Oh, really?
It's like a nice thing.
Like, do you gift your books, or you just, like, you buy them and, like, somebody, like, you're thinking about somebody, like, maybe they could use this book. Like,
these days what I do is if I mention a book on, like, a video, I'll buy a physical copy from Amazon just so that I can do a giveaway on the video.
Oh,
but what I've done in the past is there was, Happy by Darren Brown and The Course of Love by Alain de Botton. I bought like multiple physical copies of them just so that if a friend's birthday was coming up, or even if someone randomly came to my house, I would be like, hey, I reckon you'd enjoy this book, and just give them a copy. And I think that's like quite a nice thing.
That's amazing. You're the second person I've ever heard say that, because a few months back, have you heard of George Raveling?
No, who is that?
He is one of the biggest, not biggest, but he's a very, very, very well-known figure in the basketball community.
Oh, okay.
He coached with the Dream Team. So if you know Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley.
Like Space Jam.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay. So it's basically he's like huge within basketball. He's the director of international relations for Nike with basketball. Like he's all over the place with basketball. But I went to go see him talk back at my school, and he mentioned that he's a huge and avid reader. He reads a lot every day. Yeah. And one thing that he does is that he gifts books to everybody in his life. Like instead of like giving them fancy things or buying them a watch or just anything that is like really it's not that important, I guess you could say. He gives them a book.
Oh, yeah.
He gifts them a book. And like when I heard that, I'm like, wow, I've never thought about gifting somebody a book. But more likely than not, you're able to get something out of a book as opposed to like a physical item. Like a watch is nice, it's a timepiece. It's something that, it serves a purpose, but like a book can transform a life.
Exactly. Yeah, man.
So it's like
books have the highest ROI possible of any purchase. Yeah.
You put it perfectly. Perfectly. But back to rapid fire. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. Rapid fire is
really exciting conversation. I just want to say that first off. You are amazing.
Oh.
So, next question for you. How often do you experience doubt? And when you do, what are some things that you do to, kind of negate it?
What do you mean by doubt?
Doubt in any of your endeavors, for example. Like, have you ever doubted... Like, do you have doubts in regard to you with your channel, for example? Like, is there anything that, like, sets you... I need to, like, word this or, like, frame this so that it's, like, concise here.
So if you mean the classic definition of doubt, I don't really experience a lot of doubt. And I think a big part of that is that I try and be as outcome independent as possible. Okay. So, for example, if I'm making a new video, I would have in the back of my mind... this video might do well, this video might not do well in terms of view count. But I don't really have any goals insofar as I want my channel to hit 1 million subscribers by Q1 2020. Because because if I had that, then I might experience doubt that, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Or if I had, oh, this next video, I want to hit 1 million views, then I might experience doubt that, oh, I don't know about that. But in that almost never even ties into the thought process. The thought process is simply, I think this will make a good video. This might do reasonably well. I'm going to put in my best effort to make this video. And at that point, once it's out in the world, I don't care at all about the view count, or at least I try not to. That's the kind of direction that I'm working towards. And so when you're approaching it with that level of, in a way, pessimism, there's no need to have any doubts, because I think in order to have doubts, you need to have an outcome that you're kind of hoping for or expecting. And if I'm not hoping or expecting any outcome, then what am I going to doubt?
So it's not that you're keeping expectations low, but it's kind of just like...
Oh no, it's exactly that. Exactly, keeping expectations low.
I feel like that has it could potentially have a negative type of...
Okay, why do you think that? I'm curious.
Not me personally, but I'm saying if you were to say to somebody else, it's just like, well, why don't you want higher expectations?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a depressing way of looking at life. Exactly. You're a glass half empty sort of guy.
And most people do think about, they do think that way, in my experience at least. With the people I'm around.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. I personally think there isn't really any value in having any expectations at all. Maybe I skew too far in the opposite direction, but I think even when it comes to things like friendship, I have very few expectations. When it comes to, just anything that I create, I'm putting out in the world, and in the back of my mind, I have a vague idea of sort of what I expect it to do, but I try and distance myself from any expectation in that regard as much as possible. I just think that's a healthier way to live. Otherwise, I don't know. I find that if I had expectations when it comes to something as simple like videos, I would be disappointed a lot by videos not reaching quote their expectations.
Okay, I see what you're saying. And now that your channel definitely has more traction than it obviously did when you first started, does that play a role in that at all? Knowing that you have as big a following as you have, and you have you hit a certain level, right? Not a level, but you've seen success. Is there any in the back of your head, is there any stress that you're okay, is this where it kind of caps off, or do you think about it not going any further than it already is?
Oh yeah, constantly.
I guess that's how I was trying to.
Yeah. Oh, that's what you mean by
frame the question before.
Yeah. So these days, a big part of, and actually for the last year, a big part of what I've been thinking about when it comes to quote the strategy for the channel is how can I make this as longer term endeavor as possible. I don't want to be one of those kind of YouTubers who's relevant for 2 years and then drops off the face of the earth, or tries to live in a bygone era. So a lot of my strategy these days is focused on trying to create long-term value in some sense or another.
Evergreen content.
Sorry?
Evergreen content?
Evergreen content to an extent, but more if I were to imagine myself doing this sort of thing in 10 years' time, then what's the sort of stuff I can make right now that would set me up for this still being relevant 10 years from now?
Okay, I get what you're saying.
So, the iPad 2019 review isn't evergreen content.
It's not.
But it is pushing towards a long-term, quote, career in tech reviews, especially if I can do that review well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying.
But I mean, this is something that I often experienced when I had my own business as well, which is that every year you kind of look at the revenue figures and you think, oh, maybe this is the year that we won't do as well as last year. And that was a big part of actually why I didn't enjoy running the company in the last kind of 3-4 years, is because once our revenue started to dip and I wasn't putting as much effort into it, then I had in the back of my mind that, oh crap, I've let this thing go. I've put in so much effort to make this happen, and now I'm not putting the amount of effort required to sustain it. And that was quite an unhealthy way of thinking about it. And then I read the second book that changed my life, which was a book called Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. I don't know if you've heard of him.
You're going to have to reference that after this episode.
Yes, he was featured in the Tim Ferriss Show recently. So I discovered him in 2016 when he was on the Tim Ferriss Show. Okay. But he recently replayed the interview, similar to what they did with Seth Godin.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Amazing guy, incredible thinker, and he's written this tiny book, 40 lessons for a new kind of entrepreneur. And in that, there's a quote that I turn to whenever I think about the numbers too much, or anything like that, which is that, I think I can remember it off by heart. It says, you should never forget why you're doing what you're doing. Are you happy? Are you helping people? Are you profitable? Isn't that enough? And I think I've butchered the quote a bit, but every time I read that, I think that, this is so legit. It just means that we shouldn't just think about the numbers, because it's very easy to forget to fixate on the numbers and on the outward measures of success. We should just ask ourselves, is what I'm doing helping people? Is what I'm doing making me happy? And is what I'm doing profitable? And if you can do that, then you're winning at life.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, you definitely painted the picture. I don't think you butchered that at all. But no, that's great, actually. Like I said, I'm impressed, but I'm not surprised at all. Like, your responses are absolutely insane.
Oh, thanks, man.
Some of these things.
It's all that reading I've done on the Kindle with all the highlights that you should start doing from today.
Yeah, I got to get on that. Like, I'm just over here shocked, like, just trying to take in everything you just said. Yeah, all right, so a few more questions for you. I don't want to keep taking up too much of your time here. But this is kind of for other smaller creators, just people trying to get into content creation. Do you have any particular advice? Maybe not even just content, actually, just people who are creating things in general. So maybe you're into sculpting, or maybe you're into, just painting. Really anything. What advice do you have for creators in all forms?
Have you come across the parable of the pottery class?
Not at all. Everything that you're referencing, you're gonna have to.
So I can't remember where I first read about this. It might have been in the 4-Hour Workweek or in another related book. But it's a story of a pottery class. And at the start of the pottery class, it's like a 30-day program. The teacher splits up the class into 2 groups. One of the groups has to make 1 pot every day for 30 days. And the other group has to spend 30 days working on 1 pot. And at the end, all the pots are going to be judged. Okay. And 30 days pass, and the judges judge the pots. And it turns out that every single one of the best pots came from the group that made 30 pots in 30 days. Not a single one of the best pots came from the group that spent 30 days working on a single pot. Okay. And this is kind of the parable of it. It means that...
Yeah, I'm wondering where this is going right now.
Yeah, that consistency and consistently creating something, even if it's just something, is far, far, far better than obsessively focusing on trying to make something perfect. And so the advice that I would always give to creators of any sort, or kind of small creators when you're starting out in particular, is don't worry about the quality. Quantity is far more important than quality. If you can churn out content, if you're starting YouTube, if you can churn out 2 or 3 videos a week, it doesn't matter how bad they are, because you just have to recognize that the quality doesn't matter. The quality will improve with time. And you spending hours and hours trying to perfect 1 video is not going to make any difference. Whereas you spending hours and hours trying to churn out 5 videos is going to exponentially improve your abilities. And this was something that I first came across in a YouTube channel called Simon Clark, who was actually one of the big sources of inspiration for my own channel. He's at the time he was a PhD student at the University of Exeter. And he kind of got his start by when he was a student at Oxford University. He started doing vlogs, and he was like the first student in the UK to do vlogs as a thing. Okay. And he made a video about advice for content creators, and his advice was that just recognize that your first 50 videos are going to be absolutely terrible, and the sooner you can get past those first 50 videos, the better you'll be. And so I internalized this when I started my channel. I think you can see me say it on the very first video on my channel. Like, I literally say to the camera, I recognize that my first 50 videos are going to be terrible, but my objective right now is to get past those 50 videos as soon as I can, so that I can then start creating something that's good. And I think far too many people have too much of a high expectation on themselves, because it's hard, as you're a content creator, you started to put out content, you started to attach your name to that content. You want it to be good, but you have to recognize that at the start it's going to be absolutely crap, and no one's going to care. But you have to do it anyway. You have to put in the reps. And yeah, so therefore my biggest advice to answer your question is quantity matters far more than quality.
So quantity and consistency. I basically heard that for like the past 2 or 3 years, and like you hear it and it's in the back of your head, but you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. And then you're so scared to put like that first foot forward, I guess you could say. Yeah. But like with my podcast, that was one of my biggest things. Just like, I know it's going to be bad. I know my production's not going to be good. I know, I'm going to sound like I'm far away from the mic. My soundproofing isn't good, all these other things. But for me, it was just getting it out there. And even if you look back on my channel now, it's not good. And I'm still in that stage now. Yeah, that's fine. But, like you said, just consistency and just getting it out there.
Yeah, and that was actually something that really impressed me about you, because just to let the audience know, we first met up in the coffee shop at the hospital, and you said you wanted to record this podcast and ask me a few questions, and you got out your phone. And I was like, oh, where's the microphone set up? And you were like, oh, I don't have a microphone. I'm just going to record on my phone. And that was really great, because that shows that you don't care about the quality. You care about the quantity. And that was like a really, really good thing.
Yeah, it's something that like my dad's been drilling into my head for like the past 3 or 4 years. I know we talked about, I mentioned that earlier today. But he said, don't worry about it. He said, just put it out there, get it out there. It doesn't matter. As long as you're doing something, like that's all that matters.
Exactly.
So, yeah, like normally if you took me 2 or 3 years ago, you know, I'm like, oh, well, I don't have a mic, so I can't do that, or I don't have a recorder, so I can't do that right now. But I'm like, you know what? At least I have this really awesome conversation with somebody that, you know, I look up to in that space. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I was approaching. I'm like, I don't care if it doesn't sound that great. It's the fact that I was able to do it.
Yeah, man.
So
many more benefits to quantity than quality.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. But yeah, like I said, your responses have been amazing, and you definitely know a lot. So I'm glad I got a chance to have this conversation with you.
Hey, it's all these Kindle highlights.
Yes.
That's a secret.
I got to get on it. I'm going to let you know how it works out for me. I'm just surprised you're able to like export to Evernote too, by the way. I'm actually start using Evernote.
It's incredible.
But yeah, so I'm going to wrap it up. I've been here for a minute, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But do you have anything that you want to plug? Anything that you want to link? Any new projects, merch, anything that you have going on? What can I tell the people that listen to this podcast about you?
You should tell everyone to buy a Kindle.
Buy a Kindle?
Yeah,
right,
I don't have anything to plug. Just buy a Kindle, and it'll change your life.
All right. Buy a Kindle, guys, and take a look at his channel. I'm going to link it in the description. Anything else? Are you sure?
No, that's it.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the Kindle. Like I said, I'm going to get back to you and let you know how that works out for me. Maybe
Cool.
I'll stop buying physical books. But it's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me over and for just having a really awesome conversation with me. I appreciate it.
No, it's been fun. Thanks for having me on your podcast.